Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Lucy Jenkins, and along with Catherine Ward, I am hosting today's webinar on behalf of the CIC and the Landscape Institute. I should say the webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing it afterwards, along with all the questions and a resources map. So firstly, just a moment to introduce Workstream 8 and also the purpose of today's session. Next slide, please. So the Construction Industry Council brings together experts, all on a volunteer basis, from around 40 membership organisations from right across the built and natural environment sectors. And our action for 2025 is to prepare a comprehensive climate and nature literacy CPD programme, which is going to be freely available to all. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are 10 work streams covering a really ambitious range of topics, and all are important in their own right, and they bring together different skills and competencies and also best practice. And there's a lot more about these activities on the CIC website. Next slide. So, Workstream 8. This is led by the Landscape Institute and focuses on adaptation and resilience. So both of these are critical actions in a changing climate, and they both apply right across built and natural environments. Our purpose is to help practitioners by sharing skills and also creating connections across professional boundaries, breaking down silos, and also including collectively building our resources for our climate and nature literacy CPD. So it's really about promoting holistic and innovative solutions, and also then through these creating impetus for change. So our group has been working on 3 key themes: water, biodiversity, and urban climate, because each of these can play such a pivotal role in adapting and also building resilience. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is focusing on water. The disappearance of wetlands across the world over several decades has itself created wide-ranging global changes: fragmentation of habitats, degraded ecosystems, and also disrupted water patterns. All of our projects are needing to respond increasingly to water-related risks, not only flooding and drought, but also erosion, changes to sea levels and groundwater, and water quality issues too, and plus all the associated impacts of these on our health and society. So climate and carbon are crucial concerns. However, it's equally crucial to see that what's happened with our water systems is linked to that climate change. And the result is a fundamental disconnection with our natural systems as a whole. So today, in this session, we're going to be exploring natural systems thinking and major problem solving and holistic design solutions at scale. We are so lucky to have 3 inspirational speakers this morning, joining us from 3 different continents as well, which is incredibly special. They're going to share different strategies for restoring natural systems and habitats, really founded on nature as our primary resource, and also reconnecting people with this process, and how their own projects have delivered transformational changes for biodiversity and people, really meeting very real challenges of adaptation and building thriving and also incredibly beautiful places. Next slide, please. So during the session, you're welcome, and we really encourage you to share your questions and thoughts in our Q&A section. We're going to have time after the presentations to put your questions to the panel. The Q&A is open now, and we're really hoping to have a good discussion. So do add your likes and comments as we go through. I'm going to pass on to Catherine now to welcome our speakers.
Thank you, Lucy. I think you make such amazing points about just how special our panel is today, from 3 different continents with far-reaching experiences, both academically but as practitioners, to how to to apply some of the change that we need to see. So yeah, I'll jump first to the next slide and present our first panelist. Probably doesn't really need an introduction, but I will attempt to do it anyway. But Kanjan Yu is the Dean and Professor of the College of Architecture and Landscape at Peking University, and he's the President of Tourandscape also. An internationally acclaimed landscape architect and urbanist, Professor Yu has pioneered the revolutionary concepts of Sponge City and Sponge Planet. I'm sure you've probably heard of those, advocating for land-based water-driven solutions for climate resilience, so pressing and important as the time that we're practicing at the moment. He serves as chief editor of the Journal of Landscape Architecture Frontiers and is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's the recipient with prestigious honours, including the Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe Award, the Cornelia Hahn Oberlander International Landscape Prize, and the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award. So, hello, Kanjan. Are you there? Pass to you.
Hello, Catherine. Thank you so much. It is a great honor to share with you my practice in the past 28 years and my vision, my idea about how can we solve the problem holistically. That's Lucy just used, holistically, not just single-minded. Next one, please. We call the sponge city, now sponge planet. Climate change is, next one. Climate change is certainly happening, it's undeniable. But the problem is that in the past 30 years, we put such money, a huge amount of money in something, certainly carbon. Okay, carbon is important, of course. But when you look at the chart, only 5% of investment is put into something help really creating a healthy planet. We call it nature-based solution. So the rest of them, the construction, channeling rivers and all these construction are trillions of dollars. Next one, please. And those are very harmful to the nature. But the water, actually, we almost forget. Water is not only a factor for adaptation, but also a mitigation target, a mitigation solution. When very recent research finds that water can be the major factor of climate change because it amplifies what carbon have created, the carbon emission created heat, but the water amplify dramatically. Next one, please. So if we can solve the water problem, we can not only solve the problem of adaptation, which causes flood and drought and pollution and habitat loss, but also actually can solve the problem dramatically, solve the problem of climate warming itself. So solution we call the sponge planet is land-based, water-driven. So instead of looking to the sky, we look into on the ground, in the water. 3 principles: retaining water at the source, slow down water during the flow, and embrace water at the sink. Now, those are totally opposite to the conventional solution of gray infrastructure, which means we build dams to channelize the river, use concrete, or build a flood wall to protect the city from being flooded. So totally opposite. We need a sponge catchment, sponge waterway, sponge farm, sponge town, and sponge coastline. Next one, please. So it is land-based. So 3 principles, I only give you 3 examples. Retaining water at the source. This is an example in Sanya City in Hainan Island, suffering monsoon flood every year, right? You can see at your left. So we create by ponding and islanding and terracing, we transform the land into a sponge that can retain water right in the middle of the city. Next one. And it solves the problem in just 1 year. Immediately solves the problem in 1 year. It can hold 2 million cubic meters of water. 2 million cubic meters of water in 1 square kilometer in size. Imagine the whole globe now suffering a monsoon-like flood. When you compare to England last, centuries ago, you have very mild climate. But in monsoon area, in my country, in Southeast Asia, you can see the dramatic change of precipitation. Now that's monsoon climate. And climate change means it's monsoon-like. So we also apply this kind of model in Thailand. The same thing in Thailand. By cutting and filling, use very simple tool, and only $8 per square meter. We transform the brownfield in the middle of the city into a green sponge that will cover the habitat for biodiversity and can handle millions cubic meters of stormwater, along the season. Next one. And 100 new birds come into the city. Next one, please. And the second principle is a slowdown. So we dechannelize the river. The second, the former, please. Dechannelize the river and restore the meandering of the river system, and certainly slow down the water flow and then cover the habitat. And finally, at the end of the river or at the end of the water, where the water sink, at the sea, you need to embrace water. So not building the wall, we remove the wall, create mangrove, resilient wall, breathing wall. That's the three principles. And we have built 1,000 projects, and we have enough data to show you that this can work. This is called nature-based solution. Next one. Next one, please. Yeah, I'm talking about not just a small project. It can be huge. So this is a normal flood wall. You can see on above and underneath is we remove the concrete actually, and it covers this resilient nature-based wall. It's a horizontal wall. Former one, please. Yeah. So this is the wall before. You can see that's the wall before on your left, and this is the wall after. By chopping off the horizontal wall, we create this green and gray integrated horizontal wall. Because sea level rising is not just about sea level rising. It is actually about a surge, about the wave. So you don't have to fight against the wave. You play tai chi with the wave. That's why you can create a more resilient. So final one, next one. That's the test last year. There's a huge typhoon last year. The normal flood wall, normal concrete horizontal wall, totally destroyed. And our wall, you can see our green wall, our sponge wall survive and flourish. Next one. Next one, please. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sorry. That's yeah. Okay. Here you can see it's monsoon culture that teach us how can we adapt to the monsoon-like climate change by terracing, wearing, diking and ponding, and islanding and so on, and transform drainage by drainage into a sponge city and a sponge planet. Now here is a very recent article on Nature Water. To solve the climate change, we need to restore our sponge planet, a holistic and land-based water-driven solution to global climate change. Thank you. Hello?
Hello, thank you, Kanjan.
Yeah.
That was absolutely fantastic. There's questions coming in for you already in the chat, but we'll pick them up in our Q&A. Just encourage anyone, if there's a particular item they'd like Professor Yu to dive more into, please feel free to put it in the Q&A and we'll come back to it. Thank you very much. That was really inspiring. So
Should
next,
I answer? No, we answer later or no?
a little bit later, we're going to come to the Q&A once all our panelists have spoken.
All right.
We'll come back to you. So Next up, we have our next speaker, which is Nadine Buttar-Chahine. You can see that lovely image on the screen. So again, someone really doesn't really overly need an introduction, but I will do so. So Nadine is a MENA native leader in urban development, urban and landscape planning, and specifically urban sustainability. She's shaped over 40 urban districts across her career to date, including in various regions in multiple capacities. Her work spans urban policy, strategic planning, mission-orientated urban programs, urban design in cities such as Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Mecca, Jeddah, to name just a few. As Secretary General of IFLA, the International Federation of Landscape Architecture in the Middle East, and a founder of Baladaya Catalyst, she champions and collaborates towards resilient, inclusive, and livable MENA cities. Nadine is also a global speaker and an advocate for women in the built environment, and currently is the co-general rapporteur of the World Planning Congress organised by ISOCARP. She has 2 masters and is currently working towards her doctorate. So Nadine, are you there? We're ready to hear. How are you?
I hope my voice is clear.
We can hear you.
Good, good. So thank you, CIC, and thank you, Landscape Institute, and the whole team behind Workstream 8. I would like to talk about next, please. I would like to talk about really what MENA can bring to the world in terms of what sort of strategic water resilience strategies we have been using. And because I think that climate adaptation can bring us all together into solving this challenge for all of us. Next. And it's very important here to talk about that climate change is also a water crisis, because we will feel its impact through different disaster linked to water, like worsening floods, rising sea levels, like Mr. Yu said, and the shrinking ice field, wildfires, and droughts. So water is our main ally in really talking about climate change and how we can mitigate and adapt to that, especially around sustainable water management. And this is very important for cities to build the resilience of societies and ecosystem, but also to link water to the more global carbon agenda. And here I want to cite that in the UN Water Conference in 2024, water has been a supporting element in most of the Sustainable Development Goals for Agenda 2030. And I have to really single out 3 that water plays a big role in them. One of them, of course, is SDG 6 around the clean water and sanitation. The second one is SDG 11 around sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 13 climate action, of course, land SDG around land below water, or below water, sorry, the marine life. It's, I think, SDG 14. Next. And it's very important here that when we talk about the MENA region, for us, climate adaptation and mitigation is not a nice to have. We are been here for 8,600 years, and for 8,600 years, water has been shaping our cities, our society, and has been a major element in our survival in our very water scarce region, suffering from rising temperature. And this is added to the urbanization rates we're having because of economic growth, of course. And this means that water resilience is also our way of talking about climate adaptation and climate mitigation, but in a way where every initiative when it comes to biodiversity for the MENA region has a water element, because every initiative we need to think about water, because it's a very scarce resource in our region. And this is where my presentation will focus on, in terms of saying that if MENA region is able to provide these solutions, then the world also can benefit from this. So it's a global effort here. Next. And we have to think about it as a process. So climate is really a process, and it begins with the patterns, right? Patterns around land use, patterns around transportation. Of course, heat islands is also a pattern, how we are shaping our environments, and artificial drainage, or what also Mr. Yu talk about, the scientific engineered solutions that sometimes are very gray and very dry. And this is also a pattern. But then how we can talk how these patterns bring to this process. And there are other indirect processes that feed into that, whether it is runoff, erosion, nutrient cycles, movement of organism and community development. We all know, for example, that the minerals in the sea are very crucial for nature-based solution, but also for greening. So how we can link these two ecosystems together. And this is where effects come into place. So what are the effects that we are seeing? What are the dynamics that we are seeing? And how we can actually put on the effects we want through drivers. And again, it's a cycle, right? So topography and climate become a driver to a different type of pattern. And this is where we want to break the cycle really between the driver and the pattern to lead to different processes and different effects. And I bring here a very quote that really inspires me, is that our greatest need today is to see life as a whole. And the word holistic, I think, was a common thread for all of us as a team, to see everything as a whole, to see everything in terms of its many sides and their proper relations, and also to be to have an integrated view of life. Next. And I would like to cite some examples that where nature, water, especially around coastal landscape and arid environments, can be an inspiration for other solutions in other regions. Of course, the sponge city in Muscat, I would like to give credit to a consultant that worked on the project, but this is basically thinking of a block and how this block can use water, but also green to really becoming a sponge block. This is on the urban scale. In Dubai, stormwater is really about how we can make ponds in parks and ponds in public spaces, and how these ponds can actually take care of our water flooding. Of course, more and more as we become more, I would say, educated in nature-based solutions, the edges of these ponds are becoming more natural, and they are becoming more, they integrate more biodiversity elements. In Abu Dhabi, mangrove restoration, one of the largest in the Middle East, and the mangrove restoration in Abu Dhabi is also protecting the island where most of the urban population live. So for Riyadh, for example, xeriscaping is being used as a landscape-based approach, but also it's linked to reducing water use while greening, because for dry city, this is not an option. It's a choice to survive. So I would say that the MENA region offers a different dryland and coastal nature-based model that could be replicable globally. Next. And I would like to say also, and let me stop here a little bit to talk about that water has one of these amazing qualities where it can be on different scales. It can run off on different levels, and it in a way, it has a scalable strategies that can be cascaded down up to the local level. And for here, I would like to mention three major programs that could benefit or give inspiration. On a city level, when you talk about urban forest and corridors, of course, this is all linked to also water. And I want to mention here the Green Riyadh, because in Green Riyadh, the biodiversity initiatives are also tied up to other initiatives like grey water recycling, stormwater drainage, but also stormwater pond. On a district level, we all talk about the importance of water as a leverage for public spaces. And here I'm quoting UN Habitat latest initiatives around water resilience, how we can use water as a leverage in our climate resilience initiative. And this is where, of course, water-sensitive urban design is a major strategy. But how do we mainstream that? And Abu Dhabi did it through the design manual, where it combined its public realm design guidelines with the landscape design guidelines that are water-sensitive in order for new districts to take care of these dimensions. And last, on a local scale, especially when you talk about the ecosystem ecosystem or the coastline, I want to mention a project dear to my heart, which is Khor Kalba Mangrove Center in Sharjah. And that's a center in the middle of the mangrove to educate people and educate the younger generation on what is the role of mangroves in terms of not only carbon sequestration, but also climate resilience and adaptation. Next. And water and climate also, they are about social goals and how we can bring the community aspects. And especially in urban contexts in MENA, vulnerability can manifest in different ways. So you can have, for example, economic vulnerability. It can be also I would say, environmental vulnerability, but also social vulnerability. And I want to mention 4 examples that are very important here. For example, in Lebanon, water and food is very much interlinked, especially with the socioeconomic crisis, where it was used on rooftops, especially in low-income areas or vulnerable areas where refugees reside. In parks in Amman, communities were engaged in order to think around how they can green while taking consideration that it's a water-scarce city. In Khor Fakkan, the water infrastructure was used to improve the livability of the city, but also in order to plan ecotourism activities around it. And last but not least, public spaces in Doha, especially around using them all through the year. This is where water cooling ponds were used, very shallow water cooling ponds because of the humidity. They also helped with the urban heat island effect and made these public spaces available all through the year to all the residents, but also the office workers. Next. And all these strategies or all these initiatives and programs in MENA, they are also around place. And it's very important to think of a place as this context where everything takes place, be it on the social level, be it on the economic level, be it on the environmental level. And please let me just focus on one, because this is very important. One, when you talk about, for example, biodiversity, we need to also talk about the water and food nexus. So the water and food nexus with biodiversity can give rise to places, especially around the green commons and urban greening. If we talk, for example, about urban system and we take an approach of ecosystem services, then this is where access to services can come into place and where blue and green infrastructure can be integrated in terms of design. When it comes to community spaces, including the community to activate the space, but also to bring the aspect of well-being and culture around water and nature is very important. And last but not least, there is always an economic angle. And we talk about financing nature-based solution. Of course, the more we have land value captured through these water and green infrastructure, the more we can actually encourage private sector to come and partner with us on this. So these are different ways in which place can play a role in terms of activating this strategic water resilience. Next. And here, let me end with 3 calls. One is the call for cooperation, because, for example, a platform like this, which is amazing, bringing everybody together from the globe to strengthen data exchange and knowledge bridges. Next. And also the professionals, because I feel like we as a professionals, we are driving strategic urban resilience. So we need to connect more. We need to talk more about the dimensions of water and policy, how we can translate these goals into spatial and design framework, how we can use these larger projects to mainstream and implement our goals, but also how we can be empowered in the early planning stages to connect land, water, and nature. Next. And for that, I would like to call you all to lead on inclusive and integrated planning and to co-create nature-positive urban futures. Thank you.
Nadine, thank you so much. It's quite there, but 3 amazing presentations that we're given, and if only we had all day to go and deep dive into the details, but thank you so much for consolidating it, and so much of such a broad topic, so thank you. If anyone's got any deep dive questions they'd like to ask Nadine, go ahead in the Q&A. We'll come back as soon as we can. Thank you so much, Nadine, and we'll see you in the Q&A. Right, up next, last but never by no means least, is Peter Lee. So Peter, affectionately known as Pete, is the head of philanthropy and partnerships at the WWT. So Pete has worked in the not-for-profit sector since 2012. He is driven by the potential for charities to collaborate with the private sector and a wide range of stakeholders to achieve greater scale and impact. Pete has launched multi-million-pound partnerships in both the UK and in Australia with industries including retail, insurance, technology, energy, logistics and media, while also growing income from statutory and philanthropic sources. At WWT, he has the opportunity and urgency to transform partnerships to restore wetlands and all the benefits they provide. I think the other thing that's really pertinent about WWT as a charity is they are not just British Isle focused. They are right across the world, but I'll pass over to you, Pete. Are you there? You can take us from here.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. And thanks to the other speakers. Really just fascinating examples. I think great case studies that really tell the story about the importance of thinking about nature-based solutions, the role they play, and the clear value that they provide. If you go on to the next slide, please. So in my presentation, I'm going to provide a few further examples. I'm going to give a bit of a UK focus, and I'm going to talk mainly about the opportunities at our coastline. I think the UK, despite being so nature depleted, we're very fortunate to have this incredible coastline. There's huge opportunities there, and also massive urgency to think about the role of coastal wetlands. I'm also going to touch on the barriers. I think with all the information provided in this webinar, it's just looking like a complete no-brainer to do this at scale. So why isn't it happening? So I think we need to have that conversation as well about what are the barriers and how do we overcome those. So you go on to the next slide, please. So firstly, a bit about WWT. For people that don't know us, we are the charity for wetlands and wildlife. Probably best known in the UK for our 10 UK wetland centres. We manage around 6,000 hectares of wetland. We welcome around 800,000 visitors a year to our wetland centres. And so as a charity, we are all about restoration of wetlands for the benefits they provide, but also engagement and connecting people with nature. Really on the principle that if people fall in love with nature, then they will want to protect it. So we've got that kind of dual role as an organisation. But as Catherine mentioned, we also operate internationally. So we have sites in Madagascar and Cambodia. We work across 4 hotspots globally where we see the greatest opportunity, wetlands which sit on vital migratory pathways. We also coordinate and work with international organisations, wetland charities and other organisations. Around about 350 members so far across 6 continents. So there is a huge international, I suppose, footprint which we are involved in, which helps us to think, operate at scale and to share best practice. In addition to wetland restoration, we also have a leading research department. We also look at species work as well, so we can reintroduce and protect threatened species. If you go on to the next slide, please. So I think a lot of this has been covered, but important to just say why wetlands. And we've talked about the phenomenal value that they provide. In the UK, it's been estimated that creating or restoring 100,000 hectares of wetland could generate £11 billion in societal and environmental benefits over the course of 27 years. In flood management alone, every £1 invested in wetlands for their flood management benefits will return or will yield £10. So there's a huge ROI that's just looking at flooding. And then when you start to layer on the other benefits that these solutions provide, when you look at the fisheries, the well-being they provide, carbon sequestration, there is a massive case, a business case to invest and to prioritize blue and green infrastructure over grey. If we don't address flood risk in the UK, insurance companies won't be solvent in 20 years' time. That's in the UK, and that might sound like a pretty a doomsday kind of quote. I heard that at a conference last week, and that came from a director of one of the leading UK insurers, and it was a room of insurance industry colleagues. So this is what the industry is saying to each other. If they don't act, there is not going to be solvency in the insurance sector, such as the flood risk we're faced with in the UK. And yet here is a proven example, a proven solution using nature, using all the examples that have previously been shared. We have these solutions and that we know that they can provide massive value. And I suppose then if there is a case for why, you might then look next to where. So if you go on to the next slide, please. In the UK, there's kind of good news and bad news. The bad news is when you look at our coastal wetlands, we've lost around 85% of our wetlands across the coast. The good news is that leaves huge opportunities for restoration, because there are opportunities literally everywhere for restoration, such as the nature depleted nature of our coastline. WWT has done some really pioneering mapping work. It's all open source, and this is available to everyone free of charge. We've used GIS layers to look across the UK, effectively mapping where in the UK wants to be a wetland, and then overlaying that with various data layers to look at where you might get the greatest value. So you can look at, on this tool, opportunities for carbon sequestration. You can look at where flood risk is highest. You can look at where water quality is poorest, where physical and mental health is poor, and you can start to build a case where you will see the greatest return for wetlands. The map there on the slide highlights salt marsh in particular. We've only got 30,000 hectares of salt marsh left in the UK at the moment. There are opportunities to restore 300,000. And so there is massive opportunity out there to restore at scale in the UK for all the benefits that have been explained. So if you go on to the next slide, as I said, there's a really strong and clear and urgent need to do this, and yet we are not seeing I would argue, the scale of involvement investment that we need. Recently, the Crown Estate, in partnership with Blue Marine Foundation and Finance Earth, conducted a study to kind of dig into this. They spoke to over 100 stakeholders to try and identify what were the current barriers in the UK that were preventing the change that we need. I won't go through these all on the slide, but you can see they kind of split them up into finance barriers, to policy barriers, and to science barriers. And this was done maybe about 18 months ago now that this was released. We have, and we continue to make a lot of progress, and WWT, probably fair to say, working across each and every one of these barriers right now. Certainly on that science case, trying to build the case for support, working with partners in the finance space to try and build those financial models and vehicles to enable the flow of private capital. And in policy terms as well, doing what we can to try and influence and prioritize blue and green infrastructure. It's a very complex space. It's very fragmented. Ultimately, no single organization can achieve the scale of change that's required. And so primarily what we need to do is think collaboratively and find forums like this to form partnerships, coalitions, where we can bring together our skills, expertise, and our scale to really influence change and start to mainstream nature-based solutions. If you go on to the next slide, please, because I didn't want to leave at something kind of all doom and gloom. If you do that, then what you can get are these real incredible nature-based solutions at scale. So the image there is of Steart Marshes. It's just 10 years old. It's a salt marsh created through a managed realignment program. It's been effectively a test bed for us. So ever since its inception, we've used it to measure impact, so that we can see what kind of the benefits have been to the community and to nature. You can see the slide there. It's we've already got in that 10 years 53 waterbird species, 9 bat species. These are IUCN red listed species. The carbon that was stored in this site, only 250 hectares. It stored more carbon in a 4-year period than 1 million trees would store in a 10-year period. So the argument for carbon is huge, and it continues to be farmed. So this was farmland, and it's still farmland. So it's grazed for salt marsh beef, and it also provides vital value through fisheries, in addition to as well the flood risk as well, where it's helping to protect around 100,000 homes. I think the final slide, if we go on. And I did want to touch as well around the importance when doing this of bringing the community, involving the community in these changes. We were talking about big changes of land use, and just down the road to Steart, which was created 10 years ago, there was a site proposed to do something very similar. It was done very much to the community as opposed to with the community. and all the benefits that could have been created through this salt marsh restoration effectively will never see the light of day, because the community felt like they were being kind of bamboozled into this. There was instant reaction, instant newspaper headlines, Facebook groups, objections from the MP, and a site that could have been just as vast and potentially valuable as Steart Marshes won't now go ahead. So going back to the theme of the title around kind of the importance of co-creation, of bringing in the community, if you get that piece wrong, all the other pieces, even if you've got all the other pieces of the puzzle, you won't be able to get these projects off the ground. So it's vital that we really engage and inform people about the value and the importance of these solutions. Thank you very much. Oh, I've got one more slide. Do I get to just finally say?
Of course you can, Pete.
This is another great image of Steart Marshes. So you get a proper image here of what it looks like and the scale of the salt marsh that's been restored. And today is the first ever World Salt Marsh Day. This was a project created by WWT exactly for that reason, around community engagement, helping to inform people about the value of salt marsh. We've given salt marsh, we've put it up on a pedestal. We've created its own special day, globally recognized. So I can be the first one to say to everyone on the call, happy World Salt Marsh Day. And I can close there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I think we'll all need to be
Thank you.
hashtagging that on LinkedIn later, won't we? So yeah, just thank you to our speakers, but we'll touch on that point again in a moment. The questions are coming into the chat, so I will pass over to my esteemed colleague Lucy Jenkins to host the Q&A. Over
Thank
to
you
you,
very much.
Lucy.
So thank you for all the questions that you've been adding to our chat. So I'm going to go first to Konjan Yu. There's a question here from Leo, who's been so inspired by your work, and really just asking you about some of the key challenges and how, what advice you could give to designers.
Yes. Well, it is a revolution. I think it is a revolutionary thinking. First, science. Second, policy. Third, financial tools. Finally, capacity or technology. I have to say that first, the scientific community, the science community today still stick to the carbon credit or carbon emission. I think it's fine. Okay, we know carbon is a contributor, but the solution is totally opposite. As I mentioned today, yeah, we put a lot of investment on great infrastructure for adaptation. We try to build more and more solar panels and windmills and hydropowers. They are green, but not necessarily ecologically sustainable. Okay, that's number one. We need to change your mindset. You got science. Today we understand, continually more scientists understand that it is this low cloud, the cloud, the vapor, the water actually cause it's a reduction of water, about 10%, 15% of reduction of cloud may be the major factor of global warming. And 40% of depletion of the sea level rising is contributed to the depletion of groundwater. Now that's important. People usually not talk about that. 40%, 20 to 40%. It still need scientific data, of course, but we know that can be a huge solution if we can recharge the aquifer. Okay, so that's about the science part. We need the scientific community to talk about that water actually is the key to fix the problem. Certainly adaptation, but also mitigation. Yeah. The second one is policy. As soon as we have the scientific data, scientific voice, we can certainly change the policy. The UN policies, the government policies, the national policy, that's certainly the major problem. The third is actually is about financial tool. As I mentioned, Today I was with World Bank and AIIB, and it says, oh, they have money, they have the money, but they keep building the walls in Africa, keep building walls in Indonesia. I mean, that's nothing to do with the flood. I mean, nothing to do with climate, right? They just build a wall, just dumping the concrete. So that's about financial instrument. Where are you going to divert the investment? You know, today, 95% divert into something is not beneficial for the nature itself, for the planet. And finally, technologically, we have to understand that nature-based solution is a kind of engineering. Okay, today we are all about engineering, like the construction institute, your guys. I mean, nature-based solution can be an engineering solution. As I mentioned, you know, it's modular approach. It's based on 5,000 years of farming engineering, farm engineering, water management engineering, and so those can be a solution. And finally, because most of the majority of the audience is from England, for your country, you know, you invented this great infrastructure. When the climate is mild, you know your 5 inches pipe can control urban drainage system. But today, 4 inches, 5 inches is far than enough. Like New York last year, you know, you get 5 inches, 6 inches. Only 6 inches you get flooded. Yeah? But what about China? We got 100 inches. That's what. How can you create this same kind of great infrastructure to solve the same kind of problems, the flood problem? And no way, no way. So it is revolution. It is a revolution change, a new kind of technology. We call it ecologically based technology or nature-based technology that we have to for research, for policy, for capacity building. Yeah, for your question, Leo.
Thank you. I can see. Thank you also, because you've answered several other questions which have come up in the chat. Thank you very much for that.
And it's a soil thing. I have to say, I mean, other people say about the water, and the soil. Called he has a good idea, very good idea, called a sponge soil. So from the sponge soil, you know, hold water that can hold carbon. Use carbon to hold water to recharge the aquifer, and certainly increases the humidity, and certainly increases the low cloud and cool down the planet. Now, so that's the whole idea from sponge soil to sponge farm to sponge waterway to sponge watershed, and certainly sponge planet. It is connected to individual family, individual person. So that's why I make water so attractive, because it is linked to anyone, any individual. Anyone will be part of this project. Not like carbon. Carbon is a tragedy of commons. You know, the Delta airline can buy carbon in Amazon Valley. That's ridiculous. Make no sense, right? Because they are emitting more carbon by buying a patch of Amazon forest. Make no sense. So, but water is connected to everyone. Your backyard can be water holder. Your rooftop can be a backyard, can be water holder, and certainly your farm can be a sponge cell.
Thank you very much. So, looking at some of the other questions, which are obviously they're very linked to how you've been answering those questions about scales and challenges. I wanted to ask, we could ask this question to both Peter and Nadine. Peter, if you could, there's an interesting point here. We've been talking about holistic solutions. What many practitioners are tasked to do is to look at a site with a site boundary. And sometimes that is a challenge. I wondered if you could talk a bit, you know, from your experience in Sturt Marshes, for example, about how there's a need to look beyond that boundary, and how that relates to issues of improving soil health and aquifer balance and so on.
Absolutely, yes. So I suppose to take, I spent a bit of time in my presentation talking about salt marsh, but actually just looking at one habitat type in isolation probably isn't the right approach. You need to take that kind of whole seascape view and the interconnected nature of how you need kelp, you need mudflat, you need these all kind of complementing each other, and sort of a healthy ecosystem surrounding the habitat is really vital. I think in Nadine's presentation, she talked about those processes, kind of working with those natural processes being so important. So across all of our 10 sites, we work very closely in the surrounding areas that we kind of we think of as our kind of waterscapes. So we are keen to work with surrounding kind of farmers and landowners to think about that larger picture, whether that's kind of wildlife corridors or looking at the full hydrology of the land. When we're looking at Steert, for example, it sits within the Somerset National Nature Reserve. And so by working with other ENGOs in the area, for people that are kind of based in the UK might be familiar, but Somerset Coast, the Somerset Levels, the interconnected sort of nature of those really being critical. So effectively, it comes back to the point around the need to work in partnership, that we need to know what's going on in our surrounding areas to maximize the value of what we're doing on our own land.
And there's a question also, and which follows on from that, about who then are the key decision makers to make that change.
If I carry on. So I suppose to give an example, one of our centres, we were talking last week to a farmer who owns the land surrounding our site, and we were talking about what we might want to do and our future vision for the reserve, where we might expand and what the implications of that expansion might be. So were we to create, for example, additional salt marsh, we'd be doing so on existing wet grassland, and so we'd be looking for compensatory habitat adjacent, so working with neighbouring farmers to restore additional land. They were having their own consideration around what they might want to do that's best for nature on their farmland, and this is both the tenant farmer and the landowner, and they're also looking at kind of within the policy framework where they might get the greatest return for working with nature. Ultimately, it came down to communication of by sharing our vision, they could then see where their interventions might have the greatest impact, and actually where they had been planning to work might have actually contradicted or kind of been in opposition to our hopes and aspirations. So I think there's that need to collaborate in terms of who the ultimate decision maker is. I think there are lots of different drivers there. When we're talking to different farmers, there's obviously commercial considerations. So we need to put forward a case which is not only best for nature, but also works with the farmers and provides kind of comparable compensation for the work, and also has a long-term vision and is sustainable. So we need to build a case which is not only best for nature, but best for the farmer in that case, and obviously the local community as well. So there's definitely a complex picture there, and building those relationships have been what's been critical to getting that work off the ground. It can come down to big landscape scale interventions, can come down to lots and lots of cups of tea and just sitting in people's front rooms and talking them through and bringing them on that journey. So it starts at a very local level and builds upwards.
Thank you very much. There are some other questions as well about the impact of projects which start at this catchment level thinking, but I wanted to bring the questions back to really talk about the impact of nature recovery within these projects, because it's such a core element. So I wondered, Nadine, would you like to talk a little bit about that, and maybe the actual experience that water brings to people and
Yes.
the nature that comes with that?
Yes. They say water has a million-year memory, and in our region, we always think that water sometimes survive even cities and people. So one of the things that is very important is that water is a cultural context. So you might be related to streams that have happened before, and then there are names in the region or names in the area where are still have some water connotation. Water is a place context because this is where people also might remember memories of their childhood or activities they used to do as a teenager. So there's a societal meaning given to water. And the third one is that water also shapes the land. And I loved Professor Yu idea of land driven, because the land, this terminology, the land, is not only engineering. Land is people, land is meaning, land is culture, and land is society. So in French, there is a name for it, territoire, and there is it's a very nice territorial. It's a very nice connotation. So water, in a way, help us understand the land, and land bring back the water. So can I give you an example here about the wadis? In the Arabian Peninsula, wadis are very, very, very important because they carry the memory of water that have been going through either in surges or in storms or even on an annual basis. And it becomes the memory of the land, but also the memory of the people, because some people have also wadis associated with them. So in Riyadh, the wadis are very, very important. And when Green Riyadh came in, there was guidelines specifically around these wadis, how they could be conserved, and how they could also be used when there is storms, but also how nature can also live back into these wadis, resurrecting memory and resurrecting attachment to them, and maybe also making them visible, because wadis tend to be absent in our drive for urbanization, our drive for cities, and our drive to pave everything with cement and fill everything with buildings. And when you approach the wadi, it's not only landscape architects, it's urban designers, it's urban planners. It's a way to bring people together, disciplines together, because you have also the irrigation engineer, you have the civil engineer, you have all the people trying to say, okay, what is the structure of the wadi, how we can make it visible, but also how we can make it into a way for us to bring the memory, to bring a meaning for society, but also to bring back and fight or adapt to the changes in the climate. So a landscape is always bigger than what we can express. That's what I try. And the word landscape is land and scape. So the land here is a way to bring also the disciplines together, right? The whole way of seeing things together.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just go on to our final slide, because we've assembled through our learning today, but also in preparing for this, a resources map. Liz, if you're able to share the next slide, that would be fantastic. Liz, if you're there. Well, I'm going to carry on anyway. Our final slide. Oh, here we go. There. So this brings together a lot of the topics. We've gathered resources, and this will be shared with you, and it also has live links for each of the resources under the different topics. So do use it and share it. You know, this collective learning is really quite amazing. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everyone also for joining this morning. I just thought, for a closing thought, if I could just hand back to you, Kunjan, and just whether, if you wanted to answer that same, or speak on that same point about nature and people, society, and what these projects, the impact that these projects actually have.
Yes, as I said, we've been practicing for 28 years, built over 1,000 projects in more than 200 cities. And we have some data, but we'll made more data to show you that we can verify, can easily verify that it's not only create adapted flood and drought, which today, global-wise, but certainly in monsoon countries like in Southeast Asia, in China, in Indonesia, and India, certainly social benefit. People love it. All people love it, and enjoy. And economically, I have to say that economically, all my project it just double or triple the property value surrounding this area, and certainly global-wise, you benefit the planet. I find this other question asking about to what extent spongy city can solve the problem, to solve the flood. I have to say that we have three kinds of flood, three kinds of disaster: local, regional, global. Global is sea level rising. Regional is regional flood caused by rivers, and local is urban flood, any place. So sponges. That's why I want to say that we want to extend the spongy city to spongy planet. If you want to solve the problem of the sea level rising in New York, you have to fix the Amazon River first. You have to recharge the Mississippi River aqueduct. Groundwater. And solve the problem of agriculture in Brazil. Brazil is agriculture is bulldozing the trees and just mechanical farming. You need to create a sponge, catch water. Then you solve the problem of sea level rising in New York. So that's why I think we have to think locally, regionally, and globally. Now that's why water is manageable, can link to everyone. And the budget for water is very, very low. I have to say, it is very low compared to $7 trillion we already invested every year on carbon. We might be able to fix the problem already if we have $7 trillion to invest in water, nature-based, holistic. Why is this holistic? Because the water is the only factor, ecological key that help biodiversity, cool off the planet, and beautiful and productive. So that's a holistic. Holistic, not everything, mean everything. It is a key, solve the problem holistically. Now I think that's promising. That need a revolution, change. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can
And
I
thank
just
you to,
add one thing?
yes,
Please,
please
I want
do.
to say that for us, for a long time, we know that Earth is the only planet that has water. So we are very, very, very fortunate as a planet that it's a source of life. So when we focus on water, in a way, we are focusing on life itself on this planet, because that's the reason 70% of our planet is water.
Thank you very much. So thank you to all our speakers. Amazing, really inspiring. And the speaking from 3 different continents, I think that is absolutely incredible. A real motivation and impetus for action and in our projects. Thank you to everyone for joining, and looking forward to our next webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great honor.